It's just a question of, are you going to habitually run into these stretches where he like goes down for 6 weeks and then he comes back and he's searching for it.
Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma, your Cubs beat writer over at The Athletic. Patrick Mooney is on vacation on the Jersey Shore, Gym Tan Laundry, all week long for Patrick. I don't know if anybody gets that reference. It's like 15 years old, right?
It sounds like hell for Patrick.
That is the voice of James Fegan. He covers the White Sox for Sox Machine, one of the best writers out there, not just for the Sox, but beat writers, sports writers, you name it. James is at or near the top of the list, in my opinion. Also a good friend. Really happy to see him succeed in the ways he has. He just knows how to talk to people and write about baseball in ways it's rare, and I love watching him do his thing. And he is busy right now. He is thankfully James is able to join us, but Pedro Grifol just got fired by the White Sox. We're recording on a Thursday. So this is the breaking news. James, this isn't a surprise. Everyone kind of knew this was coming. But I think it's right now, this is pre Chris Getz talking to you guys. Kind of what's the state of things right now? What are your expectations for these next 2 months? And what do you think this team will be looking for?
Skip Shoemaker, maybe. I would obviously they're like one of the worst teams in Major League history, including the worst team in baseball right now. I would say this isn't like profound analysis for a team that has lost 22 of 23, but their play noticeably fell off another cliff during the Pirates series right before the All-Star break, and then continued. They've had stretches their starting pitching's been, fine-ish most of the way through the rotation. Certainly, I don't know, Andrew Benintendi's randomly been decent, since the break. There's a way I could see them playing at a level where they don't set the all-time record for losses, because the last 4 weeks have been a noticeable step down in some way. And I'm not, and certainly Cubs fans who are enjoying the investment in Craig Counsell right now, I'm not a big managers or saviors believer, but this was something that was kind of lingering over everyone. All the players certainly knew that Pedro was up to be fired since 3-22 start to the season. So to see some sort of lift, break in the clouds, or just kind of clarity, now that they're through the trade deadline and now they're through the coaching change that has felt inevitable for 3-4 months, I could see them improving their play or being a bit sharper down the stretch. I certainly don't think Luis Robert to be this bad for 2 more months would be surprising. And with Miguel Vargas, with Brooks Baldwin, they have a number of guys who, at least this year, have torched AAA or torched AA, who are going to get more acclimated and presumably play better down the stretch in a way where maybe they don't lose 125 games. So I guess that would be my expectation. I don't think this is going to be quite like Joe Girardi to Rob Thompson level of transition, but I think we've at least seen some historical examples in the last couple of years of a team getting released from a manager who, depending on your persuasion, is either pretty bad or a pretty bad fit or some combination of both, and doing a little bit better when they finally cut the cord.
Yeah, so there's some value in that. Obviously, some would say what's the point in firing Grifol? The season's lost. It's not like they're making the playoffs. Like you said, this isn't.
They're going to make history.
Rob Thompson. Yeah. So I think avoiding history, that type of history, is significant, matters, right? It matters to the players. It has to, I would think. Is it something that you've discussed with them at all, with the players, that kind of staring down history, whether it's the losing streak or the loss total in general?
It's not their favorite topic, but yeah, they're aware of it, and yeah, they don't want any part of it. And it can't be their day-to-day rallying cry, let's not be the worst team ever. But it's something that they're cognizant of, and they've all been asked about at different intervals of the season. So yeah, I think and it's something that Pedro Grifol, admitted that he kind of said at the All-Star break. He addressed the team and said that they wouldn't want to set the worst record of all time. They responded by losing their first 17 games after the All-Star break. So great meeting. There's a little bit of dispute about how much he put it like we need to do this, and how much he put it as you guys need to do this. And maybe he'll respond to a text or call from me and set the record straight. He denied the way that he put it on the players at the time, but like they just didn't respond to this guy. Like,
yeah,
it's almost like clarifying, like, a lot of firing David Ross last season. Was he really to blame? Is someone really going to do better? Does the mistakes really work out? There's none of the ambiguity here. Like, clearly this wasn't working. Like, the things you preached when he came on, they're awful at. Like, they're the worst defense in the league. Maybe they're 29th by some metrics. He's a former hitting coach. He talked a lot about, like, we're going to talk about how they need to prepare for the vertical movement on this fastball, and use a lot of like analytic language to prepare them and make good swing decisions. They make terrible swing decisions. They're the worst offense in 40 years. They're probably only like 28th or 29th in walk rate, but like miserable, like just not a coherent team plate approach. Like, it's almost refreshing after like all the politics of Tony La Russa or Rick Renneria getting pushed aside, that it's just like, well, he was clearly the worst manager of the worst team in baseball. They needed to make a change. They should have done it sooner, and we're not searching for the reason present here.
I think when there's going to be some Cubs fans that hear the answer to your first question, to the first question I asked, because you talked about how, that they're probably, yeah, I assume they're better than the 21 game losing streak they went through, and that was a step down, and maybe there's a little bounce here. Cubs fans are terrified that's coming this weekend. I'm curious. Crochet's going on Friday. I am not clear on how they're using him, how long of a leash he has. Is there is 5 innings out of the question for him? How are they using him? What should Cubs fans expect for Crochet? Because that's going to be the big hurdle, in my opinion. Once they get to the bullpen, the Cubs will probably have a good chance. But although the Cubs have handled solid pitching lately decently, this offense it's been 10 days ish, maybe less of decent offense. But still, I think Garrett Crochet is obviously one of the better pitchers in the game. How much should the Cubs expect to see him? How long, I guess?
Now, the person who's gone on record about the plan for him most recently doesn't work for the organization anymore, so take it with a grain of salt. But he hasn't gone beyond like the 75 pitch range recently, and that's usually limited him to like around 4 innings. If he's going through guys at like 10 pitches an inning, he could get to 5. I see that easily. He hasn't been particularly sharp since the All-Star break. It's not like a specific like velocity decline or anything like that, but he's starting to look like a guy who's maybe, has blew away his career high in innings, a couple months ago, and is maybe, hitting a little bit of a wall. I'm sure he could shut me up and correct that, but, it was 4 walks to 2 strikeouts his last outing. He's been ambushed in the first inning, has a couple outings since the break. I don't know if I would quite view him as the boogeyman for the Cubs in the way. And, you're probably going to get multiple innings from kind of a right-handed long relief guy, whether that's Chad Kuhl or, they just used Touki Toussaint in leverage the other day, so maybe him. But you're going to get, like, there's going to be a soft underbelly to a Crochet start just because of how they have to fill out the innings, on top of the fact that this is, like, the leakiest like bullpen ever in terms of like, which everyone should be well aware of since what they saw at Wrigley Field, and some
Right.
of those guys are gone even. So I mean, they closed out their 1 win since the All-Star break with Dominic Leone in his first appearance, like after missing 2.5 months with elbow soreness. I can't even remember the middle guy, and like John Brebbia, who has had stretches of being really good this year, and but also has a 6 ERA. I don't think like Crochet's going, we don't have a chance. Should be the
Right.
mindset of Cubs fans. There'll be, you know, a moment to strike at some point.
So my understanding is that the Cubs will, like, a Cubs White Sox trade just isn't a realistic thing to happen. But you know, not at least going forward. There's going to be a tax if that happens. Jed Hoyer isn't interested in paying that tax. But I know that there was they checked in on both on Crochet at least on Robber. I think Robber would be an interesting acquisition for the Cubs. They need a superstar bat. I know he's not performing like a superstar bat right now, but it's kind of it's the type of risk you make if you searching for that superstar and you're not willing to give Juan Soto $500 million. And if Vlad Jr. isn't available, I don't know if it's a fit. I like PCA. I think he's turning a corner offensively. So is Robber a fit? That the outfield is already crowded. There's so many things we could discuss there. But do you think Robber still has that in him? Is he capable of being that star that he was? What it was as recent as last year. He looked like a star. Am I right on that? Maybe it was 2 years ago. But
It was last year. As long as
yeah.
it's felt, it was actually last year.
Does he have that in him, or is this a guy like what's happening this year? And do you think he has that level still in him?
I think so. He's had stretches of being really good this year. A little bit after he came off of injury. As much as like his strikeouts have absolutely exploded and he's swinging through fastballs and it's really weird. I think his general chase stats are all pretty much down, which is kind of encouraging progress. It's kind of like the main question in his profile. So it's weird that it hasn't clicked. I think the concern is like the consistency you're going to get it with, like, especially if he's now had this hip flexor injury twice. It's probably I think we'll see stretches of Robert looking like Robert, and, you know, maybe another 5-win season here and there, maybe multiple. I wouldn't question him. I think he's still like a, prodigious raw talent. It's just a question of, are you going to habitually run into these stretches where he like goes down for 6 weeks and then he comes back and he's searching for it. He's just looked extremely like out of sync since the All-Star break, in a way where he just, was really putting together bad at-bats yesterday too, where he's like staring at fastballs and then he gets in the swing mode. He's swinging at sweepers 2 feet off the plate, and it's, he's making contact because he has a lot of bat speed and some skill for bat to ball, despite the huge strikeout rates and the huge whiff rates just from all the chasing. It's just like how consistent is it going to be if he's going to have interruptions, and I think that would be like the scary thing. And certainly I think there's plenty of Cubs fans who would probably think PCA is going to one day be better than them anyway. But if you come out and you're having him play in like cold April weather off the lake and he's stinking and then he gets hurt, and I think there's an easy way for it to look like a disaster right off the bat if you trade from the offseason. I also think like a big component is that like the White Sox, one, didn't do very well at this deadline, and two, know that Robert is mercurial, but also like the highest ceiling player and like in their organization to a degree. So they want to sell him at a high point, and that's going to, one, up the premium of the costs, but also it's going to make it maybe not like the easiest thing to pry away during the offseason if he kind of still has kind of this mess season. I think they would still view him getting hot and you're selling 2.5 years of control next deadline as like a better window than like, would you like to buy a damaged Luis Robert at full price during the offseason?
So that I was going to ask that it's not a guarantee that he's traded this offseason. And same question with Crochet. Do you expect Crochet traded this offseason?
That I would be less surprised by. One, they've been like just talking so openly about trading him for a while now. I certainly don't think like the relationship is, they both insisted that they're good after like kind of the fallout, but for him to forget to kind of publicly basically take issue with CAA, with the fact that like, the kind of word is that like they're not really looking for an extension. I don't think like, his representation fairly thinks like he's probably, Well, he's not going to get it rewarded in ARB the way he should because of that. No team is really going to structure like buying out his arbitration years at the price point they would want as like a number one starter. So beyond like the White Sox revenue situation being kind of a mess and me not thinking they're going to pony up for a big starting pitcher, no real history of, extending the pitcher at like a high cost. That's not usually like Jerry's bag. Like they extended Chris Sale and Chris Jose Quintana, but those are really low risk moves at the price point they got. And they kind of wanted Lucas Giolito at the Aaron Nola cost, the first Aaron Nola extension. And when he balked at that, like that, those talks didn't move any further. So they've never really like locked up a elite pitcher at anything other than like hometown discount costs. So it'd be surprising, especially at this juncture, if they're able to do that for Crochet. And just like with Cease, I think it's by the offseason, there won't be like the workload concerns of like, is he going to be able to pitch down the stretch? And you're not going to inherit the risk of taking a starting pitcher into the season and hoping he doesn't get hurt and hoping he performs at the top level. So I could see that happening a lot more easily. The Robert, when they have an extra year control and maybe a bit more reason to think like he'll mash if he's healthy and comes and has a normal offseason.
Last one, James, and I look. I'm curious what you think here because I don't think it's a debate, but there are people I've heard talk about which season is tougher for fans. What the White Sox are going through when you expect them to be bad. Not only are they bad, they're historically bad, arguably the worst team ever, or a team like the Cubs. A lot of fans expected them to be good in the playoff hunt, and they've disappointed. I think it's easy for me to say it's the White Sox and their fans, but maybe expectations really weigh heavily here, and when you're able to check out as a fan, but it's got to be painful to have to be a fan of a team that could be known as the worst team ever and is being talked about that way and is generally not given a lot of national relevance. And now that they are, it's for really bad things. Like I can't imagine that's easy for a fan base. Maybe fans don't care about that last part about the national relevance part and they just want their team to be good. How have White Sox fans handled this? How not well, of course, but do you think it's like from your observations, you're online like I am, you see how fans react. Do you think Cubs fans have a tougher season this year or is it White Sox fans?
I would like to think there's a sect of like normie White Sox fans who just want like their team to win and do well and not be a disgrace. Like I think my mom wants them to like not like thinks this miserable season is worse than a team where that's at least interesting and competitive on a basis or provides you like entertainment value pretty regularly over the course of the season. I think it's more of like the long-term plan type fan who's like, we were trying to contend and we didn't, so thus we didn't capitalize on our window correctly, or we're not in our window, so the games are meaningless. I think that's more of an online version of the fan. I would say that those people of the White Sox fan base, they're like through the looking glass. They're like near, I want this organization to be embarrassed at the highest level. I want like Jerry Reinsdorf to be getting scorched in national media. I want this to reflect as poorly and all these people I've grown to resent as possible. So some of them are actively rooting for them to set a record. I don't think that's maybe as much as like the silent majority is like a Richard Nixon concept. I think there's a I think like the more casual fan who tunes in wants like the television program that they watch so often during the summer to be better, and thus like not setting a record, not being like disgraceful, feeling a bit more pride to like wear their their favorite team's hat, and not feeling embarrassed. Even just like playing well in this crosstown series are kind of simple joys that they wish were shored up than this. So yeah, I would say being at the point where you're just like so negative about the team in every aspect is worse than being middle of the road and kind of frustrated about it. Like the Cubs have played some fun games just even this past week, like seeing that rally against whoever it was where Dansby Swanson had that like game tying like double or
yeah, Cardinals on Thursday. Yeah.
I don't know if the White Sox have had a moment like that this season.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like there was 2.5 months of really bad, frustrating baseball, I would say, for the fans, for the Cubs. And this has been 4 full months of terrible baseball for White Sox fans. They had like a 7-7 stretch that they can hang their hat on. That's like the high watermark. Oh, 11-7. Okay. So they 11-7 is like their high watermark. I think this weekend is, as like Patrick and I have been pretty adamant, like we're not going to write about the games for a little while. Like once like the post All-Star break, they did not do well out of the gate. And it's like, okay, they teased us before the All-Star break. We're taking a break from writing about games until they show us that they can get back in it. This weekend could be that point where they kind of get, if they win both games, they're 1 game under 500. If they win on Friday, they're 2 games under, and that gets them. That's the first time since I want to say like late May that they're 2 games under. That'll be the closest, because the closest they got was the Friday before the All-Star break when they got to 3 games under. So they're 3 games under again. I don't know. I think the Cubs. I think this is a big weekend for the Cubs, and it's going to be a big weekend, I think, for White Sox fans, right? Just like to have some pride, something to enjoy for this season. If they can kind of say like, hey, we ended your season too, Cubs fans. I think that would be nice for White Sox fans. Cubs fans really need this weekend to go well so they can try and enjoy the ones that are still paying attention, to say like, hey, maybe there's a chance they get back in this race. As weird as this deadline was, as weird as this season has been for the Cubs, the reality is they didn't sell off, and they're arguably a better team than they were before the deadline by adding Paredes and kind of shifting things in the bullpen. They didn't sell enough to get really bad, so they're going to be in it, quote unquote, for these final 2 months. It's just how close they get. I think it's interesting that this weekend has become so relevant for the Cubs. It'll be fun in that regard.
I think Sox fans would be a little bit caught off guard by feelings of any kind. Kind of to have nerve endings work again would be alarming for them. And so, yeah, maybe beating the Cubs would be a thrill, and they'd rally around like spiting the Cubs to some degree. But they're a broken, disparaged people. Like I don't know if even like rallying, like avoiding the all-time record is even something they would rally behind. Half the people a lot of responses when they announced it, just like get rid of Getz too. The guy who's like, it's his first year, like, and on the one hand, like I get it, like he's the architect of possibly the worst team of all time. There's plenty of things he did this year that like clearly didn't work at all. Like he signed Martin Maldonado, he signed Mike Clevenger, he signed John Berry, who has a 6 ERA. Like while that's like simultaneous, like he clearly hasn't at any time install a plan or even hire a manager yet. Like the level of like disgust with everything about this team is such that like I don't know if like I know what the one change that needs to happen for Sox fans to actually rally behind this group or feel good about what's going forward, and it's the one change that can't happen until some larger force. So it's a change in ownership. So that's not going to happen via mid-season press release or winning a series against the Cubs. So true happiness is elusive.
Yeah, I think you can say that about everything, James. Everyone in all walks of life, not just White Sox fans. Thanks so much, James. I'll see you this weekend. Looking forward to chatting and catching up on the South Side. We'll see if Cubs fans can get back into things or if White Sox fans feel feelings again. This is Northside Territory. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe on all your fun podcast platforms. Make sure to subscribe to The Athletic, and make sure to read James's work and subscribe to Sox Machine. Great stuff there. They have a podcast as well. If you're interested in White Sox, please do read James's work, read Sox Machine. They do great stuff. James, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Fans, thanks for listening. Everyone take care.